Okay, now we have a really special treat. And ladies, it's confession time. Who of you were teenagers in the early 70s, like me, and had a crush on our youth director, Ron Killough, like me? Now, raise your hands. I know y'all are out there. Oh, even Mason. Well, guess what? He actually could still be our minister because he is the minister of seniors at Hunter Glen Baptist Church up in Plano. And it pains me to even think that I could be in that category of seniors because I still feel like a senior at Crockett in many ways. Of course, Ron was the one who guided us and comforted us immediately the few months after the wreck. I know my strongest memory of him is when we did Celebrate Life. Y'all remember that, and how it brought us together, the bond that we created at that time. And so I'd like Ron to come up, and he's going to share with us for a little while.
Thank you. It's good to be here today. That better not be in the book. Who is responsible for this? I thought you were my friend. Let me thank you for putting Frank in front of me. What a task it is to overcome that. My name is Ron Killough. I have one lovely wife who's with us today, Sandra. And then we have 2 children and 3 grandchildren. And I am currently serving as minister of pastoral care and senior adults, and that's like herding kittens. The stories I could share just about that. We're having a great time further north. I think it's good that we are together today to remember, to dedicate, and to celebrate those who have gone before us. They are more alive than they've ever been. And so our hearts should rejoice that their pain and suffering is over and that they are waiting for us some glorious day. And knowing what to say today and do it in 5 minutes, maybe 7, is a challenge. The reason it's such a challenge is that we don't want to often to think about, talk about grief and mourning, and realize that it's a time to heal. And if we don't grieve, if we don't mourn, we don't heal. And so I'm grateful today that from our meeting in May, when I was so concerned about seeing many of the survivors for the first time in 50 years, how God has blessed them and led them to be the people that they are. And I was simply blessed by being in their presence. And so that was refreshing and rewarding to spend that time. But knowing what to say today brings me to the belief, anyway, that many, many people do not know some of the things I know and some of the things I witnessed and helped with. And I just thought it might be interesting for you to know and good for you to know these things. We had stopped in Clovis, New Mexico for dinner. And I just started watching the youth of Woodlawn Baptist Church. having the time of their lives. There was so much happiness and joy on their faces and what they said and did. They didn't tear up the place. They were acting, they were behaving, but they were behaving in just a glorious way. And so I just sat there and watched them and just soaked it in. And I wish you could have been there to see it as well. How quickly that happiness, especially that immediate happiness, went away. John Roberts was driving the next first bus, and I was sitting behind him. And John did something unusual, I thought at least, but something very practical and smart. He had one of the young men come up and sit in the first seat, passenger seat, and read all the signs on the road, and so that he could concentrate on the driving. And so often I've thought, if there'd just been a sign, narrow bridge, slow down to a certain speed, further back, away from the bridge, because by the time we saw the sign, narrow bridge, we were past it. We'd crossed it. And I remember John saying, well, I'm sure glad we didn't meet that on the bridge. Next thing out of John's mouth was, there's been a collision. There's been a collision. He pulled off the side of the road. I got off the bus, and I looked back to the east. Total darkness. Could not see a thing. So I just took off running. And I got to the bridge. There were two bodies laying on the ground that I thought had come out of the cattle truck because of the position and where they were located. But they were two of ours. And even though I didn't stop to do anything for them, I sensed that they were both passed away. Then I got around to the back of the bus. The bus had, upon collision, had nosedived the front of it into the dirt. And so the bus was kind of sitting up at the back. As I was trying to figure a way to get on the bus. And I did finally work that out. And the first person I came to was Deanna Bingaman. And she was in serious pain. We couldn't do anything else for anybody else until we got everybody off the chairs, the luggage. It was all one big, large pile. And I thought that John Roberts was standing by me, helping to pass children and youth back, out the back. But he told me a while ago that it wasn't him. So I don't know who that person was. And your name, sir? Keith Tomlin. Now I remember that name. And at some point in time, Keith told me to get off the bus. I said, why? Been on there for 2.5 hours. He said, there's nothing else for you to see. You need to be off. So I got off the bus, and the first thing I noticed was that there was gasoline and diesel gas and Raider gasoline everywhere. And I thought it had rained at first, but it hadn't. And I asked somebody, I don't know if it's you, Keith, but somebody told me it was gasoline and diesel. And I said, we need to spread the word that if you're smoking, put it out in a way that it won't get into the liquid and so forth. I didn't know how to handle that. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse. Just did the best that we could. And I ended up going to Clovis, New Mexico, with 2 injured in a pickup truck. And we got there to Clovis. A man showed up. He was a Presbyterian minister. He was looking for me. He didn't know my name. He just said in this larger group, there would be a youth pastor. I can't remember his name, but he was a Presbyterian minister. He stayed with me. We went back and forth from Clovis to Santa Rosa. Then we got word that somebody was sending an airplane to take all of the survivors back to Austin. And I'd asked my father, who had driven up from Midland, to help count the number of seats. So he did, and he said, "It fits perfect." We got ready to load. There was one seat short. So I put everybody on the plane, and I came back prepared to drive back to Austin, not ride the plane. And all of a sudden I heard this call asking me to come back. Now, most of you probably know this, but in the cockpits there's a seat that will fold out from the side. And they said I could sit there. Of course, that's against regulations. But as far as I know, there was never any investigation or anybody put in jail for doing it. But I was still in shock about what had happened. And all I could do was sit there, contemplate, and think about what it's going to be like when we get back to Austin. Because the last thing the Presbyterian minister told me was, "Ron, it's going to get tougher when you get home." And I didn't think that was possible, but he was right. So, as we were continuing to get the bodies off and moved to Clovis, this minister drove me back and forth. And when I was in Santa Rosa, I sat down on the bed just to maybe get a nap if I could. And I realized that I had not shed a tear yet. And then my parents showed up. And once my mother grabbed a hold of me and started sobbing, the tears came. And it was good. It was good to let those tears out. I was just sobbing. The next day we found out that we could take the plane back to Austin. And when I was sitting in that cockpit, in a sense I was dreading coming back to Austin, because I was going to be then facing parents and workers and members of this church. And I wasn't sure I could face them. We landed, the plane taxied up to a gate, and there must have been 300 or 400 people there. I couldn't move. I just wasn't sure how I'd be received. So I sat there. Finally, the pilot said, "You need to get off." I said, "I have to." He said, "Yes, you do, sir." So I wasn't sure what to expect. I got off, and someone said, "There's Ron. Ron 2. Ron Hicks was Ron 1, and I was Ron 2. And suddenly I was just engulfed by the number of people around me, expressing love and appreciation and thanks for bringing our children home and so forth. It's like anything that I'd ever experienced before. After coming home to start life again, I received an invitation to go to this conference in Dallas held by Lyman Coleman. And there was a couple in our church then that had already registered us and said, "Ron, you're going with us." I said, "No, I'm not. My place is here. I don't think I can handle that." They said, "You're going with us whether we have to drag you or not." And I knew that couple pretty strongly, and they meant what they said. So 3 weeks after the accident, I find myself in a room in Dallas, Texas with 500 believers. And each one of us has been given a little slip of paper. And on that paper was an animal. Lyman Coleman came out and said, we're going to get in groups of 8, and here's how it's going to happen. You got a piece of paper with the name of an animal. We want you to start making that sound when I say go. And when you hear another dog, grab elbows with them until you have a group of 8. Well, I thought, this is going to take forever. It took less than 30 seconds. We all had our group formed. Then we were told to get knee to knee in a circular realm. And so we did, and I sat down across from this attractive 45-year-old woman. And I told her my name and what I did, and suddenly she just started boo-hooing. I said, what did I say to make her cry like this? She told me that she had been praying for me specifically for the past 3.5 weeks. Now, don't tell me that woman God did. And the more amazing part of that story is that she would show up here at the church. She lived in Dallas because God had put me on her heart, and she believed I needed her presence. And that happened 5 or 6 times. We are still like this. She's close to 90. We write letters, we talk on the phone. I will never forget her. Her name was Star. And she was a strong, strong believer. You've already received this, I hope. Not, we have more coming. But somebody put this on my desk a couple of weeks ago, and I believe there is truth here. The title of this is We Need Each Other. Lord, we need each other. But in our pain or in our pride, we often act as if we don't. Or in our fear, we hide. But Lord, help us to learn quickly that the walls we build to protect ourselves sooner or later become the walls that imprison us. Help us to allow those you bring into our lives to be a part of our healing. Help us to choose to share our lives with others and not to insist on taking this journey alone. Teach us that often you take the bruised reed that we are, the smoldering wick in danger of going out, and give us to someone who can do for us what we cannot do for ourselves at that moment. Help us to accept these as precious gifts from your hands. Amen. There were other people that were in my life in special ways during that time of healing, and I believe they were angels. I believe they were sent by God to help minister to me. And I thank you for listening today.